Yerushalmi, Bava Daf Chav Zayin. We're at the bottom of Daf Chav Vav on the base of the Hedli Mishnah, Halacha Beis. Ganu al Pishna Yim, V'tavach Machal al Piyan, Oy al Pishna Mecheir, Misham Teshun Levav Chamisha. So if either he had the same witnesses saying that he stole and he shech, the door was two different sets of witnesses. In both cases, it's Mishalim Dalit Vehei. Ganav b'Shabbos. So let's say he stole and he sold it on Shabbos. Ganav avodah zarah. He went and he sold it at church. Ganav b'Yom Kippurim, where he went and he shechted and he sold it on Yom Kippur. Ganav Mishel Aviv. V'tavach umacha v'acha kach, and only afterwards Mesa Aviv. Then his father died. Ganav etavach umachav achkach hikdish, or he stole, shechted it, sold it, and then he is makdish. Misham tashlum evachamisha. In all these cases, you pay tashlum evachamisha. In Shabbos, again Yom Kippur, you pay even though he was tevech on Yom Kippur, um, but it's chorus, so therefore it's not kam levid rabbi. Shenk in Shabbos, the case is only got umachav Shabbos because Shabbos is kam levid rabbi. Fine. Zog the Mishnah weiter. Ganav etavach umachav l'refuah. So he went and he shechted it for some medicinal purpose. Will a klavim for the dogs. Ashech v'nim setreifa. Ashech et chulam ba'azarim. Misham tashum v'achmish. In all these cases, we don't say that by the fact that he wasn't really, he shechted it. Let's say it turned to be a treifa. He's not using it for food. We don't say it's not a legitimate fiich mechiru. We say it is, and therefore you're mechuyev to pay. Shimon in the last two cases, he by treifa b'chul ma'azara, because he holds it like the Pnei Moshe points out, as a shchita sheinu ruya, and therefore it's lav shma shchita, and therefore you are hot. Okay. So the Gemara gonna pishna yem v'lo yikein amar Rabbi Ava the Gemara b'shem Rabbi Yochanan hazid b'chelav sorry v'shogag b'karban masrin boy v'loiko maybe carbon. So you see that is double jeopardy. You see that you could get both. You see that you could get both. So let's just see the Merafulda. The Merafulda Memezid bechelev v'shogeg b'carbon. Masma v'loiko maybe carbon. So you see you get both punishments. Perish sheyada shechelevu. So the Merafulda he knew it was chelev. V'lo yada shechayev carbon al chilasa v'hisru boy. So he knew it was chayla, but he didn't know you have to bring a carbon, and they warned him. Chayav al amazid shall lav malchus. So the fact that he was amazed in the life is chayav malchus. Malchus is to give malchus. Valashgoga dike bachila, because he didn't know that you're not allowed to eat that there was a carbon on the achila. Zushaloy the shesh carbon, then chayav nami carbon. So he's chayav to bring a carbon. So you get both vas. You can mumbas prepare klagadol sphere lay. That's the Bava sphere shogi be carbon kilo shogi be gufa iser. So why over here do we say that he's mishalem above chamisha? Let him get malchus and pay. So Rabbon Bachia b'shem Reb Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak kidei rishah so shnei dvarim mesul lebezden hatoifes echad mihen or at toifes echad mihen yatzadav v'shemos l'shamayim. There's a difference. Right? Oh, it's Kedei Rishasa means Bezdin will not apply two punishments to you. Right? But if one is for Bezdin, one's L'Shamayim, and that's, let's say, a carbon. So in the previous case, where it was Hezed B'Chelev, Shog B'Carbon, so over there, one is L'Shamayim, and one is for the Chelev, which is Malchus. So therefore, it's not a problem. We only won't give you two punishments from Bezdin. Okay. Sagt Eli Mishloach Gimel, Ganav Pishnaim B'Tavach Machal Apiyam, and it's so Zaymim. What happens if he stole al Pishnaim and through those same Shnaim, he turns? They also claimed that he was Tavech Meicha, and they turned out to be Zaymim. Misham Lekol, they had to pay everything between the two. They would end up paying Kefil and they have to pay Dalve. Ganav Pishnaim B'Tavach Machal Pishnaim Acheirim. Let's say the two sets of Aiden, one on the Gneva, one on the Dalve Hey, one on the Tvich Bechira. They're both found to be Zayim. Now, Rishon Misham Tashlomi Kefel. And we'll see how this case would work out, how they became Zayim. because the order matters. So Elvin insays Mishon Misham Tashlomi Kefil. So the eight they Geneva they pay Kefil. Achron Misham Tashlomi Shloisha they have to pay the equivalent of Dalet Vehei. Now Nimtzu Achroinim Zayimim, and let's say only the Eidei Tvicha were found to be Zayimim who Misham Tashlomi Kefil. So the Geneva still stands because the original the Eidei Geneva were not were not Muslim. So therefore, the Gan of pays kefil, but the second cut of Aiden that were Zayim Hemisham Tishul Mishloisha. What about Echad Min Rechreim Zayim, but later Shnia? What's if one of the Eide Geneva were found to be Zayim? They're the ones who showed up first. They were right. One of them turned out to be a Zayim, not even the second one. Then the whole thing is batal because if there's no Geneva, there's no Tivicha Mechira either. Echad Min Rechreim Zayim batal Kaleidus, like we said, Shemain Geneva. I'm sorry, I skipped something here. Echad min achroinin zaymim batlei de shnia. So if let's say that one of the Eidei Tvicha became a zaymim, so then the only he's only parted from dal vehei. He still be chayv to pay kefil. Echad min rishonim zaymim, but if one of the Eidei Genevo came first, we came a zaymim, then batl kalei. Does the latest is batl because shemein Geneva ain't tvicha ve'ein mechiva. Okay, zogt. The Gemara, Ganav Pishnai, Vechule, Ad Kedom Shabo Ed Geneva Vedet Vicha Kaachas. They came together. So now we'll explain how is this that they came together. So what happened was over here, Bo Ed Geneva, Veloy Kiblum. What happens originally? The case is Ed Geneva showed up, and for one, whatever the reason was, we were not Mekabel their Edus. Vachakach Bo Ed Vicha. And then after that, after the Eid Gnever came to Bezin showed up, and we were not Mekabelim, the Eid Tvicha show up. So Amrlim, so Bezin says to the Eid Tvicha, V'yodim, guys, we're just letting you know, Shekvar Bo Eid Gnever, that before you guys came in, 15 minutes ago, the Eid Gnever that we're here for the same guy. V'loy Kiblim, and V'loy Kibalnim, we were not Mekabel them. We didn't accept them. V'aydeichem, and now through your testimony, on a Mekabel, so we're going to go back, and we're going to say to the Eid Gnever, guys, come back, we're going to accept you. So what's happening here is through the Eidei Tvicha, the Eidei Geneva are being accepted. So it turns out that the Eidei Tvicha are responsible for the whole case of it, because without them, we wouldn't have accepted the Eidei Geneva for whatever reason. So now, what happens if Nimtzu Zaymimin, Nimtzu Zaymimin. So now it turns out that both Kitei Eidus, the Eidei Geneva and Eidei Tvicha, turn out to be Zaymimin. So Eidei Tvicha Mishalmin al Yedei Eidei Geneva. Just going to give so the Merafulda. So the Eidei Tvicha would have to pay the chelik of the Eidei Geneva, because without Eidei Tvicha, like we said, Bezdin would not have accepted the Eidei Geneva. So therefore, the Eidei Tvicha are responsible for the Eidei Geneva as well. Reb Chizkiya loy ma'kein. He didn't say this. Ela ad kedom shabo Eidei Geneva Eidei Tvicha kachas. What is that case? Now, for obvious reasons, he says it's actually the other way around, and this is the case. Bo Eidei Tvicha first. V'loy kibloy son. We're not mekabelim, and that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, this is a case you could easily imagine, right? A guy walks into Bezin, two people walk into Bezin and say, "Hey, we saw Joe shecht the animal," right? Bezin look at them and say, "And therefore what?" So we can easily imagine this case, which is why Reb Chizkiya changes it. So Bo Eidei Tvicha first, V'loy kibloy son. V'achakach Bo Eidei Geneva, and afterwards Eidei Geneva come up. So 10 minutes after the Eidei Tvicha leave, they said Joe shechted the animal. Walk into other Eid, and they say, "Hey, we saw Joe steal an animal." So now already what happens? So Omerlem, so Bezin will say to them, "Have a yoidin shekvar bo eidei tvicha v'lo kibalnom." By the way, guys, you guys eidei Geneva, you should know that 10 minutes ago there were eidei tvicha here, and we didn't accept them. But al now that we understand that this was a stolen animal, on a makabel, so we're going to call them back and say, "Oh, okay, Joe was a teveach from a Geneva, from an animal that he stole." So now we're bringing them back. So it turns out that the Eidei Geneva are the ones who completed the picture here. So now Vanim to Zayim turn out to be Zayimim. Eidei Geneva Mishal Eidei Tvicha. Since the Eidei Geneva were the ones who held everything up, they held up the whole case, because without them, like we said, we didn't accept Eidei Tvicha. So they would pay the chelik. Not only would they pay kefil, they paid the dal vehei that the Eidei Tvicha would have had to have paid. And again, this makes perfect sense. Mashenkin, the first way we were learning, it was the A-Day Geneva came in for whatever reason we didn't accept them. And Chizki was bothered by that. So he switches it around. Fine. Gon aval pishnayim. And we said v'tavarach al piyem, amra b'zeir ado amra, eid zoymim ein nifsal bebezen, elamatz me nifsal. So Zira says that this means to say, what we see from here is a bezin, when we say an AIDS, when he becomes AIDS zone, when it becomes possible, is not mekano lahaba, that's nifsal bezin, in other words, meaning that from now on in bezin, as I came, it testified that he became an AIDS zomim, so from now on, he became AIDS zomim, going forward, he is puzzle. Um, he becomes possible. My friend knows me'atzmin ismail is that Adis from himself becomes possible. So Adis that he was involved from the time that he became from the time Adis that he was involved from the case that he became an Eid Zayman. So let's say he testified for A, B, and C. Right, so he comes on Sunday, testifies for A, comes on Monday, testifies for B, comes on Tuesday, testifies for C. Now, when he becomes an Eid Zaymim, let's say he became an Eid Zaymim on the case of A, he now becomes puzzle for puzzle from the time of the case of A. Now it's going back to Sunday. So that's Lamafreya. So Elamatzma Nifsal. So this is what we're saying. So we're saying this, somehow we see this from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Pasala Basroya. Pasala Basroya Achas. We'll go to Pnei with the Marafuldas gives over here. So let's just see what are we talking about over here. So let's see inside. Zok Marafulda Marabzira Do Amra Itzam Nefsal Bevest. So Zok Marafulda Beperek Shmidi the Truma. Mavua, we explain Kshanema Shein Nefsal Elo Bevest and Hainu Mikana Lahablo. We explain V'lo Mafre. V'diklami Seifa. The Masniten. That now we learned Nimtza Echad Min Rishonim Zaymim and Batla Kala Eidos. Right, and we see some Mishnah. So if one of the Rishonim, like we saw in our Mishnah, if one of the Rishonim become possible, one of the Eid Gnei become possible, so the whole Eidus goes away. Now, V'yisal Kedart Mekana Lahaba Nifsal, that only that the Eidus only becomes possible Mekana Lahaba. In other words, from when they became Zamimim, everything that they said before was perfectly fine. If that's the case, why is the whole Eidus bottle? Right? They only became Eid Zomim after they said Eidus about the Geneva. So why now do we go back and we passel them for the original Eidus and the Geneva? So it must be then it's Lemafreya. Avagashim ein Eid Geneva. So you'll tell me, well, Avagashim ein Eid Geneva ein Tvicha Mechira. So you tell me, what do you mean? They became Eid Zomim, and if you don't have an Eid Geneva, you don't have Eid Geneva, then there was no Tvicha Mechira either. But at that time, they were not apostle yet, right? They only became apostle later. Ella must be therefore Zokmafulda Mekano Freyo Nifsal. So we see from over here that it's Lamafreya that ate Zayim because Nifsal. So now, once he became a Zayim on the Geneva that he testified, so now that testimony gets uprooted, and there was no Tvich Mechiri there. So why don't we just say? Right, the Tana at the end of a Mishnah says, Shemein Gneva ain't Tvicha Mechira. Why does he have to say that? Typically, I'll just come out and say, well, because he's Pasal Afreya. So when it says Hanamila Beidus Achas, that only works Beidus Achas, right? So if you have one cat coming and saying this guy stole and he shechted, so then you can say, right? Then you can say that Lemafreya Nifsal, Eliv High Time. Aval b'shtei kitais. But when it's two separate groups of edus, one in the Gneva, one in Tvicha Mechira, ilav haitama shemein Gneva loyin of Solon. They wouldn't have because v'afagad v'reisha ibcha shemina look at the dag b'bavli reb zirus filo dal koch l'masit and trei tanoin. Okay, that's not there for us. But the point is over here that the sole reason is not lemafreya. We're saying is because we're also the Tana is mentioning of vein Gneva vein. If there's no Gneva, there's no Tvicha Mechira either. That's because we could be discussing two Kite Eidus over here. But the bottom line is we do see from our Mishnah that an Eid Zomim becomes Pasal Lemafreya. Fine. So now we said Pasal Abasroyachas. And what does this exactly mean? Pasal Abasroyachas. Atoni Kain, Amr Rabbi Yosef Medvan, Mishtei Idios. And some people now go to Shtei Asroyas. Let's say b'shtedis. Avol be'edis achas, b'asroi achas, kol edus shebatla miktasa, batla kula. So let's just see the Rafal and so Bamed v'memur Rabbi Yossi koya hai itnan nimtza achronim zayimim in. So if let's say the achronim are found to be zayimim, Bamed v'memur, right? So we said over there nimtza achronim zayimim. The Mishnah said, so who misham teshlumi kefil? The ganav he has to pay kefil because the edig neva is still valid, and they would end up the zayimim would pay the dal v'hei. So that's talking about a case b'shtei edios, where it's two adius, right? So the first one, so what happened was you had the dal the ede tvicha became zoimim, so the ede gneva still stand, and he would have to pay kefil. Avo beides achas achas zoktim afuldo mishum kivon shehem basra achas nasa kol keedes achas. It's one. Again, if you gyrus edes achas basra achas or shtei asrois would be basically we'll look at as two kite edim. In other words, because it's two hasros, there's two separate hasros. We look at it as two separate. It's almost like it's two groups of edis because each hasroya makes is for each act. As each act of hasroya we consider to be a separate case. So he says, "Avo ba edus achas asra achas ukma fod mishum kivon shehem basra achas nasa kol kedus achas." So it all becomes like one edus. In other words, even if you have two groups of edim, but they only gave one asra together, so it's now we look at it as if it's only one group of edim. The kivon shebatla miktasa batla kula. V'hadot tzarchatana loimer she'em ein gneva tepikla mishum kivon shehem basra achas. Right, so say the same thing. Just say it's because asra achas. Have like edus achas. Hanim ila beis achas. Again, that only works beis achas. Aval hocha have like beis edus. So it must be then, why does this not work? Because Ela Mishum, the main Edigneva, there wasn't any Tvich Mechir, have like Kedis Achas, and therefore it's like one. And then tomorrow we'll see the next kash is Masha Batlo Mitzasa Batlo Kula. Knows what does that mean? It's like you're telling me a rule. What are you talking about in terms of what else are you meaning to address that's not listed over here? We'll see that tomorrow.